Hi, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. So it's been quite a few months since Matt Reeves' The Batman was released in theaters, and now that pre-production for the sequel is in the works, I thought it would be as good a time as any to look back and appreciate the film for its portrayal of Batman, and look ahead to the future to see what else is in store for the Matt Reeves Batverse. I'd also like to look back even further at the history of Batman's time in cinema and see what this film did differently to its predecessors, what it did similarly, and how each different interpretation of the character compare to one another, as they all represent a distinct era of the Caped Crusader. So without further ado, let's discuss why Robert Pattinson is DC's best Batman. Alright, so firstly, I know already just making this previous statement will get me crucified by the most die-hard Christian Bale era Bat fans, but to be honest, I was never really a fan of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. Now before you grab your pitchforks, don't get me wrong, I think The Dark Knight is great, just as much as the next guy, and I can take a step back outside of my personal biases and appreciate the films for what they are, because for the most part they are pretty well made and deserve much of their praise. However, I feel they've become almost mythologized as this golden trilogy that can do no wrong, which I just don't think is truly fair. Sure, The Dark Knight is a masterpiece and all, but can you really say the same thing for Batman Begins or The Dark Knight Rises? I just never found them at all really entertaining or profound in any way. It always seemed to me that The Dark Knight was Christopher Nolan's sole focus, and the other two films were kind of just like thrown between just for the sake of cranking out a trilogy. I will say I enjoy the way the trilogy ends. I think that it has a very suitable ending for the character. However, I will never forgive them for Bane. I don't care who you are or what you say, this Bane is goofy as hell. I can never take him seriously. Half the time you can never even understand what he's saying.
Oh, Batman, I'm gonna come after you, and there's nothing I can live on it. Oh, the story I'm sure you know.
What?
Oh, somebody I'm gonna take it down. Oh, I'm gonna start in this race from the bone all the way to the roof.
What? I swear, this isn't even just a problem with this movie in particular, but like every Christopher Nolan movie. His films are just terribly mixed, and I get that he's, mixing these films with the intention of them being watched in the highest end theaters or whatever, but to me that's kind of insulting to your audience because most people aren't going to experience it that way. And don't even get me started on Tenet. Half the dialogue is impossible to hear, yet it's pretty much always crucial exposition.
Surface at the Opera House, the Shakia 114.
Sorry, I think I have some unresolved issues there to do with Christopher Nolan. Where was I? Anyway, despite the constant praise the Dark Knight trilogy receives, to me it's always felt a bit hollow. Batman is the world's greatest detective, and we never really get to see that side of him in the trilogy. In fact, we never really ever got to see Batman shine as a detective on the big screen until The Batman. I mean, sure, he would use the Batcomputer to predict the villain's plans or whatever, but he never truly actively worked with the GCPD and Jim Gordon to unravel a greater mystery. The closest that we ever got is when Batman works with Gordon to stop the Joker, but he never actually really figures out the mystery in that film. He's always playing into Joker's hand, and it ends with a bittersweet fate for Batman. Anyways, with that said, let's move on to the Batfleck films. Bruce in Batman vs Superman and the Justice League films was not Batman. I think we can all agree that these films really missed the mark when it comes to their interpretation of Batman. I mean, YouTubers have already gone in depth to discuss why Batman shouldn't kill, and I totally agree. I think Zack Snyder really misunderstood The Dark Knight Returns and adapted Batman as a bloodthirsty anti-hero, when that's simply not who he is. And on top of this, Bruce never gets to shine as a detective in these films either. He gets to do a bit of it in BVS, but his motivation never really made any sense to me. Batman is mad at Superman for the collateral damage he caused during his fight with Zod, which indirectly killed people. And Superman is mad at Batman for branding criminals, causing them to be murdered in prison, where Batman indirectly kills people. It just doesn't make any sense. Both heroes are just douchebag, unlikable, murderous hypocrites. Zack Snyder attempts to shift Batman's edgy, murderous, rampage-like behavior in his follow-up Justice League film, but he honestly gets even less attention there. I get that they need time to focus on developing new characters like The Flash and Cyborg, but there is still plenty of room for Bruce, seeing as though he's arguably the most important of the team as well. Yet in the film, with a whopping 4-hour runtime, he is sidelined and given basically no development whatsoever. It's a shame that we will never really get to see Batfleck shine. It seems at this point in the DCEU franchise that Ben Affleck will be walking away from the series for good, which is a shame, but an understandable decision seeing how they handled the character in the past. I can't really say I blame him. So with that said, I think it's time to move on to the Keaton era. I'm going to be clumping all three different portrayals of the Burton/Keaton era Batman in one, since they technically exist in the same franchise or timeline or whatever way you want to get specific about it. Now, I loved these films as a kid, and they were a great introduction to the character. But after experiencing other forms of Batman media, like the comics, the Arkham games, and the animated series, it's really bizarre going back to these films. They have a weird combination of dark gothic horror with goofy Saturday morning cartoon antics that create this weird aura of disturbing yet comforting nostalgia. They really were all over the place as a film series, but I gotta appreciate what they did for the character of Batman and superheroes in general. The Tim Burton films really pushed superheroes further into the mainstream, and without these flicks, we likely wouldn't have seen the same Raimi Spider-Man trilogy or early X-Men films that really shifted the landscape of the modern superhero blockbuster. And they created a style that permeates through all Batman media, being the exaggerated dark gothic portrayal of Gotham City. Tim Burton has this way of combining content for children and mixing it with darker, more sinister undertones that I think perfectly embodies Batman's identity as a character. Now, despite my love for Batman 89 and Returns, there are still a few aspects of these films that rub me the wrong way. For some reason, it seems Batman does actually kill people in these movies on rare occasions, and not only that, but he seems to kind of enjoy it. He also just seems really horny in these movies, to the point where it's kind of uncomfortable and distracting. Why are you smiling like that, you weirdo? Cut it out! Now, after Batman Returns, its sequels are pretty infamously bad, and I don't think I even really need to get into it. If you clicked on this video and made it this far, you already know what makes these films so bizarre, so I'm just gonna ignore it and we can move on to Matt Reeves' The Batman, shall we? I don't think anyone would really be that mad if I just ended this segment right here. Yes, here we are. I finally get to talk about my boy, the one and only Robert Pattinson. My god, I feel so bad for Robert Pattinson having to go through the backlash of his initial casting as Batman. The hate was real. I myself was incredibly skeptical at first as well, because when I heard the news of his casting, the only films I had seen him in or were really aware of was of course his infamous Twilight films and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And I think it would be an understatement to say he was very underutilized in that film's story. So I must admit, like many, I wasn't exactly thrilled to hear the news of his casting. However, within the time between The Batman's release and his announcement for the role, I had the pleasure of watching both Good Time and of course The Lighthouse. Two masterclass films in storytelling and performances. Robert Pattinson has continuously proven his worth as an S-tier actor in Hollywood over the previous decade, and not only this, but he has the mannerisms and body type for a young Bruce Wayne. I mean, just look at this scene right here. Can you believe this comes from a Twilight movie? Look at that and tell me that right there, that isn't Bruce Wayne. Not only is Pattinson perfectly cast for this role, but we have the man himself, Matt Reeves, to direct the damn thing. Matt Reeves has been sort of an unsung hero to me in Hollywood ever since his Planet of the Apes movies. I am a sucker for these films and consider them to, even to this day, be highly underrated. I'll maybe even make a video on them in the future. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd want to see. Anyways, Matt Reeves was the perfect pick to direct a modern detective thriller gothic take on the Caped Crusader. I know people have been making this comparison since the film released, but the David Fincher inspiration does really elevate this film into a true detective thriller mystery. The style truly does emanate the likes of Seven and Zodiac in the best ways possible. It feels as though this is the first on-screen event appearance where Bruce gets to shine as a detective, having a majority of the plot surround his efforts to unravel the Riddler's plans. If it weren't for the Joker tease in this movie, I think it would have been perfect in my book. When I was actually in the theater, I kind of thought that the Joker tease was actually Two-Face at first, just because of their relationship history in other films such as Batman Forever. I think that Two-Face would be a much more exciting villain to see in this universe rather than another Joker, because how many Jokers have we had in the past just 10 years even? It's getting a bit insane at this point. Regardless, I think I am slightly biased being a major Arkham fan, because this version of Batman feels closest to the Arkham games to me than any other live action version. Matt Reeves' The Batman is my personal favourite superhero movie of all time, tied with maybe The Incredibles. What? I have good taste. Anyway, I'm so excited for the future of the series and what's in store for us in the future. I would love to see the universe expand into the Bat family, where we could see Barbara Gordon, Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, and all the other sidekick Bat heroes you know and love. I think they would be great additions to this Matt Reeves Batverse. Anyways, that's all from me. Lady Gaga is going to be a great Harley Quinn, don't at me, and I'll see you in the next one. If you made it this far, I appreciate the support. Every like and sub helps out, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.